It's about that time. So welcome to Living with Memory Loss. This is a community dementia education program of Alzheimer's San Diego. My name is Amy Abrams. I am the Director of Education at Alzheimer's San Diego and very pleased today to be co-presenting with my colleague, Jean Alton.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon.
So here is our agenda for the program. I'm going to start with a brief disease overview, talking about what Alzheimer's disease and other types of dementia are, and focusing on a couple of strategies for symptom management. We won't go into detail today about things like diagnosis. We will be talking about progression, but we won't be talking about the pathology and the diagnosis of Alzheimer's and other types of dementia here today. If you have those questions, we do have our Dementia 101 program, or you can reach out to us anytime. We'll be giving you opportunities to connect to our social work team if you've got individual questions you want to ask. Today, we're going to be focusing more on what symptoms to expect and how to manage those symptoms over time. Then Jean is going to talk about building your support system and coping with daily challenges. And then I'll come back and talk about some legal and financial considerations, some things to be thinking about in terms of safety for the future. And then we'll wrap up by talking about resources for additional help, because of course this is intended to be a very broad overview for people who are living with a new diagnosis or maybe undiagnosed memory changes, as well as care partners. This program is really designed to meet the information needs of a very broad audience. So that sounds good. We'll go ahead and get started. I'll talk first about the disease itself. First, I always like to just clarify what we're talking about when we use the word dementia, because there is often a great deal of confusion about what this word exactly means and how the concept of dementia overlaps with specific diseases like Alzheimer's disease. So important definition here. Dementia is a group of symptoms that are caused by an underlying medical condition that cause this range of symptoms, changes to memory, changes in cognition and thinking, problem-solving abilities, behavioral and personality changes. Generally, when we use the word dementia, we're not talking about one specific thing. We're talking about that whole range of symptoms. So dementia is not a particular disease. It's a syndrome. It's a group of symptoms. And the changes that we're talking about when a person is living with dementia, the changes they represent a significant change from what's baseline, from what was normal for that individual person. The changes are significant enough that they become disruptive to daily function. So a person starts to struggle with work or managing the household, recreation, right? Being able to remember familiar people or keep track of the finances, for example. That is to say, the symptoms are not just your everyday run-of-the-mill trying to remember the name of that person that I just met, right? We're talking about symptoms that cause a change in your ability to do the stuff of daily life that you need to do. So dementia is not one specific thing. Alzheimer's disease is a type of dementia. It's the most common type of dementia, but it is only one of dozens, if not over 100 different identified medical causes of the syndrome that we call dementia. So dementia is not one specific thing. It is typically the word that we use when we're talking about Alzheimer's disease, but we could also be talking about frontotemporal dementia. We could be talking about Lewy body dementia, vascular cognitive impairment, many different conditions. We're speaking to all of those different types of dementia here today. Dementia is caused by pathology. It's caused by disease in the brain, and it is not a normal part of aging. Unfortunately, it's a very common part of aging. About 1 in 9 people over age 65 in the US today is living with Alzheimer's disease or some other form of dementia. So it's very common, but most older people do not have dementia, right? It is caused by a disease. It is not a disease or a set of diseases that are exclusive to older adults either. Somewhere in the neighborhood, depending upon the individual, the specific disease, somewhere between 5 and 10% of cases of dementia are what we call young onset, meaning that the symptoms are affecting somebody who is under age 65. When we talk about, you may sometimes hear the term normal onset or older onset dementia. That just means that the symptoms first emerged when the person was age 65 or older. That is the typical onset. Dementia is not a disease that affects children or very young adults, but it's not uncommon for us to see the symptoms of dementia begin in the early 60s, 50s, 40s, or even the late 30s. So something a lot of people often want to know, they want some clarity around, what can I expect? I've got this new diagnosis, or I suspect that myself or someone that I care about are going to receive a diagnosis of some form of dementia. What are we up against? What's this going to look like? And unfortunately, it's really difficult to predict what the progression of the specific disease is going to look like in the individual person for a variety of reasons. What type of dementia it is, how old the person was when the symptoms began, what other health conditions they have, because of course your overall health certainly interacts with your brain health and your brain function, I should say. So lots of different things are going to impact what this disease is going to look like in the individual person. But typically, in most forms of dementia, we see this long, slow decline in function over time that you see depicted in that graph. I always like to point out this is a kind of a useless graph because there's no numbers on it. What are we talking about? How quickly am I going to lose function, and over how much time? Well, there's no numbers in there on purpose. We do expect to see not a very sharp, dramatic drop in function over time, but instead this sort of wobbly, good days, good weeks, bad weeks. But overall, if one were to chart it over time, we would see this progressive loss of function. There are some exceptions to that rule. Vascular cognitive impairment, for example, sometimes has a little bit more of a stepwise progression than this long slope that you see here. But for the most part, we can typically predict for any individual person this progressive loss of function over time. The symptoms, what symptoms a person will have and how severe they will be is very difficult to predict for the reasons that I described before. And also, unfortunately, how long? What are we talking about? A couple of years, a couple of decades? Both are within the realm of possibility. The current statistics tell us that for people who are living with Alzheimer's disease, that particular type of dementia, the average length of time from the time of diagnosis to the time of death is somewhere in the neighborhood of about 9 years. But there's a lot that's a difficult statistic to cite and to sort of hang your hat on because there's so much variation person to person, and people get diagnosed in different stages of the disease. Right? We're getting better about early detection and diagnosis, and so more people are diagnosed today while they are still in the early stage, and that will sort of flatten that curve, or lengthen that curve, I should say. Whereas if you don't receive your diagnosis until you're well into the middle stage of the disease, it's going to be a shorter progression over time. So what exactly are we talking about when we say the early stage, the middle stage, and the late stage? As in all things related to dementia, there's no clear line where we can say this is the early stage versus middle versus late. But we typically refer to the early stage as the period of the disease when the symptoms are mild and the person does not require any assistance with the basic activities of daily life. So bathing, grooming, eating, getting dressed, ambulating or walking around or moving around on one's own. A person in the early stages of the disease does not need assistance with those types of tasks. What they are likely to be experiencing is short-term memory loss, moments of confusion, disorientation, difficulty recognizing someone, right? But those periods of confusion and disorientation don't tend to be protracted. They don't tend to be very long. We will see, while a person in the early stages of dementia who's got mild symptoms does not require assistance with those basic tasks of daily living that I mentioned, these what are sometimes referred to as the instrumental daily activities, these do begin to become challenging for a lot of people. So being able to pay the bills, managing the finances, remembering appointments, taking your medication as directed, planning and executing meal preparation, for example. That kind, it's sort of strange to call it non-essential stuff of life. Of course, those things are essential, but they're not considered the basic care tasks. The middle stage of the disease is where, again, there's no like black and white, here we're early, now we're middle, but typically we use this terminology to describe the stage of the disease where the symptoms are more moderate and the person is beginning to require some assistance with those basic tasks. They may not require physical help. They may still be physically capable of doing those things, but they might need reminders or cues or prompts, that type of assistance in order to remember that it's time for breakfast, right? That we need to take a shower, get dressed, those types of, that type of help. So in the middle stage of the disease, which we typically say is the longest stage of the disease, for most people it will be, but again, remember there's lots of variation and a lot depends on where and when a person is diagnosed in this journey here. But the middle stage does tend to be the longest, chronologically, the longest period of time. We will see more memory loss, and the memory loss becomes a little more global, where in the early stage, it's primarily, in most types of dementia, the person's experiencing short-term memory loss most significantly. In the middle stage, we might see people beginning to lose longer range memories as well, more confusion, more disorientation. The mid stage is where a lot of people will begin to have significant language and communication changes, which we'll be talking about a little bit later here today. And again, this is the time in the disease when many people will begin to need some assistance with those basic tasks of daily living, which we sometimes refer to as personal care. The middle stage of the disease is a time to be paying a lot of attention to safety, because typically the person is as physically healthy, robust, strong, mobile as they ever were. But unfortunately, they're losing some of those cognitive abilities, one of those key abilities being one's safety awareness. We will talk more about this at the end of the program, but this is the stage of the disease where we're likely to see more wandering, more accidents, more injuries around the house, for example. And then the late stage of the disease is, again, speaking in very broad generalities, it is typically the shortest stage of the disease, but there are definitely exceptions to that. The late stage of the disease is, in our definition, the symptoms are severe and the person does require assistance with all personal care tasks, all of those basic tasks of daily living. Again, it may not be that they require full physical assistance with all of those things, but they are going to need somebody to be providing supervision and help with all of those tasks. So it's not uncommon for us to see limited to no verbal communication in the late stage of the disease. 24-hour supervision and help with those personal care tasks is common. We definitely need to be planning ahead for a time that a person with late stage dementia is going to not be able to be alone, certainly not to live alone, but really not even able to be alone for extended periods of time. That 24-hour supervision is generally required. It's not uncommon for people in the late stage of the disease to have difficulty with chewing and swallowing. A very common symptom. Our esophagus gets signals from a region in the base of our brain that is frequently impacted by the pathology of Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia. So the esophagus just begins getting the wrong signals. So it becomes hard for the person, when you're breathing, when you're swallowing saliva, when you're drinking liquid, when you're eating solid food, you're not consciously making a decision about, where does this need to go into my lungs? Does this need to go into my stomach? Your brain's making all those decisions for you. And some of those wires just the messages get crossed in a person who's living with late stage dementia. So we bring this particular symptom up because A, it's very common, but B, it does lead a lot of families to have to make some hard decisions in the late stage of the disease about things like artificial feeding tubes, nutrition, hydration. We just want for people to have been thinking about these questions before you're caring for somebody who's in the very late stage of the disease. Finally, it's not uncommon for a person in late or severe symptoms to have very limited to no independent mobility, to be bedbound or to use a wheelchair full time. So none of these symptoms are universal. We can't say at the outset whether or not any individual person, whether they'll have these symptoms and how severe they will be, but we like to sort of lay out the range of what's possible during the progression of these different stages of the disease. So you have probably, if you've attended classes or programs with us in the past, you certainly are aware, or you may have heard it elsewhere, that there is no cure for Alzheimer's disease or other forms of dementia. No proven sort of validated research yet shows us, unfortunately, any type of medication or therapeutic, any type of treatment that can actually stop the pathology of Alzheimer's disease. But we do have some means of managing symptoms. So we have these 5 FDA-approved medications whose names you see here on the screen. These are medications that for many people will have the effect of delaying that. If you think back to that graph I showed you, these medications will delay that progression into the middle and late stage if they are started early, while the brain chemistry can still be impacted by the pharmacology of these drugs. But these drugs, these are what we have. These are what are approved for the management of symptoms in Alzheimer's and several other types of dementia as well. They don't do anything, unfortunately, to halt the progression of the disease itself. That which the accumulation of the particular proteins that are accumulating in the brain and causing the brain cells to work less effectively and ultimately causing brain cells to die. These medications don't halt that process, but they can delay the progression of symptoms. So we just want to make you familiar with these. Aricept and Namenda are the 2 most commonly prescribed medications for Those are the brand names of donepezil and memantine, the two most commonly prescribed drugs in Alzheimer's and most forms of dementia. But there are others as well. So Aricept and Namenda are in two different categories of drugs. They can be taken at the same time, and they often are prescribed together. But most people, say in my experience, the vast majority of individuals with dementia that I've worked with, they start on Aricept. The doctor prescribes that first. If it's well tolerated, they'll take that for a while, and then they'll add Namenda to kind of boost its effectiveness over time. But they can be prescribed individually, separately, or both started at the same time. Exelon and Razidine are other drugs that are in the same class as Aricept, so they wouldn't be taken at the same time, but if Aricept isn't well tolerated, a person can use one of those instead. And Exelon in particular is often prescribed because it can be administered via a patch rather than a pill, which is a lot easier for some folks. So Namzaric, the last one you see on the list there, is just a combination of donepezil and memantine. It's a combination of those two drugs in one pill, so it's a little easier for some people to just have to take one pill rather than taking 2 or 3 during the course of a day. But these are what we have. There are exciting new drugs on the horizon, but at the moment, we haven't had a new drug come on market in many years, something in the neighborhood of 13, 14 years since we've had a new FDA-approved medication for the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. But these are what we have for now. But we describe the management of dementia symptoms as a 3-legged stool, right? We have to do all of these things. Medications are part of the picture. They work for some people, they don't work for everyone, but we can always put into place these behavioral interventions, the other things around the person, the supports, getting care partners to understand the disease, to understand what triggers confusion or behavioral symptoms, making changes in the way we communicate, making changes in the person's environment, simplifying the environment is often the key. Sort of requiring the person to make fewer choices during the course of a day. Little adjustments like that can make a huge change. And we'll be talking briefly about some of these here today, but I just want to make sure you're aware we have lots more information on all of these topics: communication strategies, coping with personality and behavior changes, dealing with resistance in somebody that doesn't want help from other people. We do have education programs on all of those topics, as well as lots of great written resources that our social workers can send to you. So we focus at Alzheimer's San Diego on helping people learn the behavioral strategies, those interventions that are kind of non-pharmacologic in nature. And of course, we firmly believe that one cannot effectively support a person who's living with dementia without also supporting their care partner. So that is a huge part of our mission as an organization, to support care partners in understanding these diseases, just understanding the pathology, what to expect in terms of the progression, often can really allow us as care partners to be a lot more patient and empathetic in our day-to-day interactions. So we teach about the disease, we teach skills for improved communication, as well as hands-on caregiving techniques, and then of course connect people to key resources that they need: support and discussion groups, counseling, respite services, and the like. So I just laid a lot of hard information on many of you. Some of that may be brand new information, in which case your mind may be reeling a bit. That is a completely normal and understandable reaction. These conditions are very difficult to adjust to. We talk about adjusting to a new normal. remember what that graph looked like that I showed you. It had all those ups and downs. And so you sort of stabilize and figure out your new normal, and then the disease goes and changes everything on you. Again, there is a lot of flexibility and adaptability that is required of people who are living with these diseases, and certainly of their care partners. So we just want to sort of take a moment, take a deep breath, and acknowledge, right, whatever it is that you're feeling, if it's overwhelm, if it's anger, if it's resentment, if it's fear, anxiety, let yourself feel it there for a minute. Give yourself some time to adjust. These are major changes in your life, but this disease does not define the person who's living with the disease, right? There's every person who's living with Alzheimer's disease or another form of dementia. They're so much more than the disease. They retain so much in the way of their personal history, their own personality, their preferences, their values. They retain skills and ability to connect to people and to love people and to receive love as well. So it is going to require some flexibility. A lot's going to change, but I would ask everyone to just kind of be patient with yourself or the person that you're caring for, and the person that you're caring for if you're a care partner. Practice forgiveness, adjust your expectations a little bit, right? Let go of perfectionism. It's always important in life, but it's really important now. So we're glad you're here. Educating yourself and educating other people who are going to be part of your support system is key. Without a clear understanding of what's going on in the brain of a person who's living with dementia, the symptoms, the repetition of questions or statements, the changes to personality can be really overwhelming and difficult to manage. But again, with an understanding of the disease, we can be a lot more patient and empathetic. So I'm going to pause here and see if there are any questions that have come in, or you're welcome to throw some into the Q&A for us if you have any. Jean, is there any?
I haven't seen any come through just yet here, Amy, but
Okay.
Sometimes I think we need some time for the information to kind of settle and to just kind of think about it a little bit. So for everyone, as we've said earlier, Amy said, and we'll say it again, is, we're available. Alzheimer's San Diego is. We are available by email, by live chat, and by phone, Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 5. So sometimes, I'm certainly a person who sometimes needs to think things over, and then the questions come. So just remember that that's there for you, that we are here for you. So, all right. I do see one question here, Amy. It's asking about links to, for example, you mentioned Dementia 101. And do you want to just tell folks how they can, the different ways they can access that information?
Sure. I'll go ahead and I'll put a link to our webinar library in the chat, so you can link to it, but it's all available on our website, alzsd.org. Just go into, you can find our education page, and there is an archive of recordings of different programs. So all of those are available anytime. You can access them through our website, free and easy.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I haven't seen any questions come in, so I think we'll just continue on here. And I'm not sure if I have the remote control.
Says you do.
It says I do. Let's see.
Yay.
Yay! So I am going to continue on here, folks, talking about, to start here, building your support system. I hope most of us through our lives, we have different challenges that come up other than dementia as well too. And I hope that most of us have a pretty reasonable support system in place already. And that's a good thing for all of us. And we need to build on those support systems when a diagnosis of some type of dementia is entering lives. And, you know, I think right now, just during these strange times of pandemic and shelter in place, I don't know about the rest of you folks, but I've really had a look at my support system, and I have nurtured it and grown it in some different ways, obviously, but I've really paid some attention to the people that really I can reach out to, who can feed my soul during these times. And so I want you to just kind of think about that aspect of things, and think how you can apply that to your lives living with dementia, whether as a care partner or as a person diagnosed with some type of dementia. So, what does a strong support system look like? Well, it is really up to you what that looks like, but some very basic functions of a strong support system. It's going to obviously have you at the center, and then these supports surrounding you and embracing you, as it were. And you can see they're all different types within that support system. Friends and family, your primary care partner, whoever that might be, other supports, you've got your doctors, your healthcare providers, your community-based services like ALS San Diego, as well as other types of supports that are in the community. You've got your long-term care providers that may be providing hands-on care, and you've got your legal and financial people who are supporting you as well too. So just kind of think about who is in your support system, and if there's some gaps there, it's important to start addressing those gaps. There's still many families that I talk to and work with who do not have legal and financial plans in place, and they have now received, somebody in the family has received a diagnosis of dementia. So that's a gap. Amy will be talking about this later, but that's a gap that needs to be addressed, and it's important because it's a timely matter. Think about, I always like to stop on family for a moment, because family is your own definition. In my inner circle of support systems, I have some family members that are blood relatives. I have a lot of friends that I consider family. They're very close to me. And I have some family members that are blood relatives that are not in my support system because they're not really that supportive. So, here's the thing, you're not under any obligation to create a system that other people define. It needs to be how you define it. And so who, again, is going to go into this whole support system? Well, here's some things for you to think about. You need people who will communicate with you openly, honestly, and regularly. Or even if it's not regularly, it needs to be people that, even if you have a period of time where you don't communicate, when you do, you just pick up right where you left off. So that's connection that we have with people. And that's the folks we want in our support system. We want the people who will recognize and respond to changes. And so to this, I always say, honestly, if it's midnight or 3 in the morning and you've got an emergency going on, who are you going to call that's going to not think twice and hop in their car in their pajamas to either come over to your house or to do whatever it is you need them to do? Who's going to do that? And we need some of those folks in our lives as well too. And then think about who can help to maximize the quality of life for you as a care partner and or you as a person living with a diagnosis of some type of dementia. And for both, if you are a pair or a family unit, who will support all of you in those different areas. who will maximize your quality of life. So I'm thinking oftentimes here again about the people who listen and then ask questions, not the people who jump in and say, oh, well, you should do this or do that, or have you, full of suggestions about the shoulds and the woulds and the coulds. I'm not against any kind of suggestions, but I definitely need people in my life, and I would venture a guess this is true for all of us, people who will listen to what we're saying and will then support and assist in a way that is going to maximize quality of life for us. So we don't need the people who are telling us we did the wrong thing. Maybe sometimes, but certainly not all the time. So think about some of these qualities that our support system really needs to have, that's essential part of our support system, and who the people are that can bring that to the table. Yeah, so Zoom just still continues to do some funny things for me when I try to advance a slide.
There you go.
There. So, okay, so how do we build a support system? Well, the first, I think, starting point is ask for help when you need it. And I hope you've all done that at some point in time already, and that you've gotten more comfortable with it. And if you haven't, that would be my homework for all of you today. And we can start in small steps. I totally get it that it's hard for many, if not most of us, to ask for help. We're independent. We like to be self-reliant and take care of things, problem solve our own problems. But let's be realistic. How many of us are able to achieve that 100% throughout the course of our lives? No. So be realistic. All of us at some point in time have needed either a supportive ear or a supportive shoulder or a hug, or somebody to come in and cook a meal for us or clean our house for us because we're physically injured or incapable of doing it. Some kind of assistance. So think about that and be building on your skill set of being able to ask for help when you need it. People, through the course of my life, I got to tell you, and I think most people would say this, the people who are in my life that I count on and who I care about and love are only too happy to step up and help me, and I will do the same for them. And all we need to do is just reach out and ask. So please do that. Stay connected for sure to the people that you enjoy and love and the activities that you enjoy and love. And that's not just in terms of being a support system for you. It's also, well, and I guess I'm going to say the same thing in a different way. It's about feeding your soul. And that's part of your support system, is making sure that your soul is fed. So do the things that you love, see the people that you love, do the things that bring you joy and happiness. If you are participating in any kind of religious or spiritual community, and it's important to you, keep that up. Or perhaps it's something that you haven't done, but now you're thinking about and thinking it might be helpful to you. So if that's your thought process going on right now, please reach out and build on those things as well too. Absolutely attend a support and discussion group. We have many support and discussion groups here at Alzheimer's San Diego. We have, I think at last count, they're now virtual, but we have, I think, 25 or more going on. And is that right, Amy?
Yes, it's about 25.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I just am a very strong believer in these groups, and I think Amy would say the same. There is just something very powerful about being able to sit down with a group of people who are so to speak, walking in your shoes. They're experiencing some of the same challenges and thoughts and feelings and worries and all those different things. And there's no better kind of support for you as individuals than to come into a group like that, where people get it. They understand what's going on, and that you will not be judged. There's lots of things that we think and feel and experience during the course of dementia, either as people living with dementia or as care partners, where we have some responses and reactions that people who are not living with dementia or do not have a dementia diagnosis in their family might not understand. They might think, oh my, why would you think something like that? Or why are you angry at your husband with dementia? Well, because I'm a human being. So get into those support groups where you can say those things freely and not be judged, and be supported and understood. Get your breaks and get your regular respite, folks. And if you're having problems with that, please call us at Alzheimer's San Diego, because we've got some thoughts and ideas and some real viable options. So we can help you to build that into your daily life. Okay, we're going to come to, this is kind of a doozy, sharing the diagnosis. And I say it's a doozy because it kind of sounds simple, but it really isn't at all. Sharing the diagnosis.
Can I interrupt you just for a moment? I just want to read a question that we have that's on this topic because it's perfect. I'm a caregiver. My husband is prideful of others finding out about his disease. How can I get help from others when he wants to keep this disease private? So I'll just ask you to keep that in mind as you cover this topic.
And that's just a great question. So let's just kind of delve into the sharing the diagnosis business and see if we can come to some thoughts and ideas with the question that was just presented. So, okay, so this is kind of the who, what, when, where, and how of sharing the diagnosis. And of course, as we often do here at Alzheimer's San Diego, we don't have one answer to that for any of you folks. It's just unique to every person and to every family situation. So, but these are some things to think about, is in terms of sharing the diagnosis, who do you share it with? What does that look like? So is it maybe just close family members and friends, or do you go a little bit further? Do you talk with your adult children and let them know about it? Or do you not? Do you not want to worry them at this point in time about what's going on? Do you talk to coworkers, neighbors, church members? You know, these are all different people for you to consider. And what I would say in starting with this, who do we share the diagnosis with, is you can do it in little steps. You don't have to announce it to the world right from the get-go. Some people do, and that's fine. But if you're uncertain and you feel the need to go slow, then go slow. So perhaps in this instance, this lady asked if, you know, her husband is not ready, and goodness only knows, may never be ready to come out and you know, say himself and have people know that he has a diagnosis of some type of dementia. So in that instance, a thought might be to go to trusted people. Again, think about your support system, to let them know. You don't even need to say that it's Alzheimer's disease or whatever type of dementia it is. You just say that you may have noticed my husband is experiencing some memory loss, and I need a little bit of support from you. He's not ready to talk about it. He's embarrassed about it, whatever it might be. So I need, you know, you need to be clear. I need to keep this quiet. Don't tell other people about it, and don't talk to him about it. But I need your support, and this is how you can support me. That might be a way to communicate to the people close around you what's going on, what you need, without causing harm to your husband in terms of his preferences. I'm going to ask you to also then think about when do people need to know? When do they need to know, and when do you want them to know? And those are two kind of different time frames. And I want to tie kind of the who and the when together, because sometimes you'll have a situation. I'm just thinking about a family I worked with, two sisters who lived together, and the sister that was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease did not want her friends, and they had a overlapping circle of friends. The lady who was diagnosed with dementia did not want the circle of friends to know about her diagnosis. She was very firm about that. The sister that lived with this lady did her utmost to respect that. And at some point in time, friends began asking the sister, who did not have dementia, what is wrong with, let's just say, Jane? We're seeing changes, her memory's really bad, she's forgetting lots of things, what's going on? And at some point in time, the sister had to acknowledge to the friends that yes, there was something going on. And she also told the friends that the Sister Jane did not want any information divulged as to what was going on with her. So the sister gave a little bit of information to the circle of friends, but not the whole kit and caboodle. So that was another way of kind of managing a situation without causing real harm. Sometimes safety and is the issue that is going to be the overriding issue, where you need to inform people of a dementia diagnosis, or at least give them an inkling that yes, they, what they're observing and suspecting is correct. So think about that as well too. Ooh, look at that, it just went right ahead. And I only hit it once, I swear. Here's the bottom, the how. How do we communicate this information? All sorts of different ways. You can do it in person, perhaps not so much now, but certainly you could now be talking about a diagnosis of dementia with Zoom, or in phone, or in writing, by an email or a letter. So it's whatever feels okay with you. And again, think about, you don't have to give people a whole lot of information right at the start. Maybe you say something, what feels right to you is to say, look, we are, my husband is experiencing some memory loss right now. We're both aware of that. We are looking at what's going on. We just want you to be aware. And when we have further information, we'll let you know about it. Again, we're not under any big obligation to disclose everything. And the other thing is, none of you are under any big obligation to have to explain to those that you've told all the ins and outs and details of the diagnosis, how it was achieved, all the different symptoms, what are the treatments, all those different things. You can just offer to connect your people to resources like us. We'll take over that education aspect of things. And, we're darn good at that. So we'll make sure they get good, accurate information, and information that can be translated into good support for you. So don't feel like you have to own that end of things. If you're pondering this whole thing of sharing the diagnosis and just really kind of feeling challenged about how do we go about this, I want you to remember us as a resource that, again, we could do some, just talking on an individual basis with you folks and as families to talk about what you're thinking, what you're concerned about, who are the people you're considering telling, and we can give you some thoughts and suggestions. So further to that, let's open it up a little bit here in the chat box. And, I'm just going to ask any of you that wish to comment, have you shared your diagnosis with others? And, how did that go? Were the reactions good? Was it a positive experience for you? Or, did it feel like negative response? What are your concerns regarding sharing the diagnosis with other people? So just feel free to go ahead and respond in chat.
I'm curious too if talking with any children in your life is a concern for anyone. That is a difficult thing to navigate for a lot of parents and grandparents, sometimes great-grandparents or aunts and uncles, trying to figure out how much information does this child need. I don't want to scare them, but I also want them to understand what's happening.
Right.
Please feel free, just drop us a little note in the chat. We'd love to hear about your experiences in sharing a diagnosis with other people. And I'll add to what Jean said, just to say we have a lot of education resources available, not only through our website. We have a library of animated videos, like short little explainers about different aspects of dementia that can be really helpful, free, easy to share with other people. We have tip sheets, information, resource sheets, I should say, that you can download and email to another person. We also have a pretty great lending library in our office. Of course, our office is currently closed, so you can't come in and browse it. But if there's a particular type of book or a children's book or a video, something that you're looking for, call the office. Our social workers can tell you what's in there. We can work out some arrangement for a pickup. There's a lot of free and very easy to share information that's available through the organization. We have some feedback here. I shared right away. Oh gosh, this is a very common experience. Often people want to argue with me about having it, saying I don't look like someone who has Alzheimer's disease. I don't look or act like someone with Alzheimer's disease. Granted, I have mild cognitive level, but it's interesting how people want to deny it. So true.
Yep. And it is very common.
Yes.
I think actually of more than a couple, but a couple of people specifically that I have worked with that have had that same experience. And the one person that I work with gets very actually kind of upset and angry with her friends because she has been diagnosed. She knows that, and they know it too. And so it's kind of become a point of contention with her and her friends. Now they're still her friends, but she just feels like she has to do so much education with them to help them come over to the side where they believe her diagnosis.
It's I think a challenge we don't talk about often enough. Many people struggle with trying to support somebody who doesn't have insight into the changes that they're experiencing. They don't know that anything has changed with them, and that can be a very difficult thing as well. But yeah, when you know in your bones, I am doing and thinking differently than I used to, and you can't get your support system or your doctor sometimes even to listen and pay attention. It can be really frustrating. There's a nice comment here that the most helpful thing anyone said to me when I was first diagnosed was, "You are not different today than you were yesterday before you heard the diagnosis." Right? Yeah. It's really an important sort of core concept. You are today after the diagnosis who you have always been, and that's a really important message I think to share with people. Absolutely. I'm still me. I'm going to be a little different.
Yep.
Yeah.
I see another one over here, how after 1 year, my wife found the courage to tell good friends her Alzheimer's diagnosis, and that it was a relief. for the spouse to not trying to hide the diagnosis.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is a weight to carry as a care partner.
Yes.
Yes. So, and then, well, yeah, friends and family do not believe just how bad my 98-year-old mother is, because when she's with people, she's very engaging and talkative. And, you know, again, this is unfortunately a common occurrence. You know, when you're living with somebody 24/7, we all know this, dementia or no dementia. When we live with someone 24/7, we see the whole picture. When we are just seeing folks for social activities on a, you know, sporadic and or regular basis, we're seeing a different side of people. And it's not at all uncommon for folks with dementia who have previously been very sociable and you know, have good social skills, to still have those skills even, you know, quite further on into the disease. And so they can be in a group of people and you know, be kind of shining, doing really well, looking like everything is all good. And then we, you know, that's when we get family and friends saying, I don't know what, you know, you are talking about when you say that mom is, you know, really difficult, and she's often very challenging, because they're not seeing that side of your person.
Mm-hmm. All right. I would think we need to keep
moving along
here, Jean.
All right, we will do that. So, all right, we're going to start talking about daily challenges, and we'll start here with communication because it's such a biggie. I want you to know we do have a class that is specifically devoted to communication changes, dealing with the diagnosis of dementia, and for sure encourage all of you to go to it. Here's the thing with changes in communication is it's on both sides of the fence when we have a diagnosis of some type of dementia. So the person living with the dementia is experiencing changes, and the person who maybe as the care partner or family member is also experiencing those changes. So it's not, these things are not pointed at just the person living with dementia. Please be aware of that. Some of them are a little bit more specific to that though. So let me explain. Trouble, we do see people living with dementia having more trouble finding the right words when speaking, you know, so finding some gaps in the language that they can't quite find the name of that object or whatever it might be. But look, that does happen to all of us too, as a part of normal aging too. So that can happen on both sides, whether you're a care partner or a person living with memory loss. And I just want you to also understand that when a person is finding challenges getting those words and the right words to be able to you know, really complete a thought or a sentence, that is giving you as somebody who's listening trouble listening to that communication, because you may or may not be sure of what object it is they're trying to name. So that's affecting everybody in the communication. We may see more difficulty understanding the meaning of words and being able to kind of process that in terms of the context of the sentence. And so again, that's impacting communication between two and more people. There's difficulty filtering out background noise. And I think this one applies to everyone, just even as we are aging. I will say though, that for folks with dementia, that is one of the things that is a challenge for them, is because of the dementia, that trouble filtering background noise and distractions is exacerbated by the diagnosis. We do see an increased reliance upon visual cues, whether it is signs and symbols or, you know, nonverbal language, like, you know, giving our waves or our okays or whatever it might be. For everybody, there's frustration when communication isn't working. I think you would all agree with me on that. Do you all get frustrated when you're trying to get your spouse to do something differently or better, or somebody else, you know, you're an unhappy customer and the business that you are talking to is just not hearing your frustration? It can be something that starts out small and blows up because of these changes in communication. And then we can see some primary and secondary language confusion too in folks living with dementia, where they may be going back to their first learned language. And you know, that can add to some of the stresses of communication. So how do you set yourself up for success with communication? Well, here it is. Slow your speech down and talk less and listen more, which always seems counterintuitive to what we think should or would work with folks with dementia. So this is an important lesson that I really want you to keep in mind. We are by nature, most of us human beings, over-explainers. When we think somebody doesn't quite understand what we're saying or what it is we want done, we elaborate. We go into more detail. More talk, more detail, more explanation is not helpful to folks with dementia because it's just another mumble jumble of words and meanings that they need to figure out. So keep it simple, keep it concise, and talk less. Take your time, slow it down. Don't be in a hurry. Verbally, physically, slow everything down. This business of all of us, you know, come on, let's go. We have to do this and do that. And we're moving about as we're talking and doing so many different things at once. Slow it down. Adapt your physical environment. Reduce the distractions. Turn the TV off. Shut the door. You know, turn the radio down, whatever it is. Put your, here's another good one I always like to do. Where did that go? Here. Put this down, folks. Don't be like this. Mom, listen, I want you to get ready and then we go to the doctor and blah, 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 blah. Put it down. Put it down. Look at your people. Make eye contact. Be present. Adapt. That's the physical environment. That's your physical environment, but it's theirs too. So think about that. Repeat as often as is needed, but in the same way that you said it the first time. And this is absolutely true, right? Take a deep breath. If it's not working right now, try it again later. Just take a deep breath. Take 10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is, half an hour, and then give it a go again and see if you have a little bit greater.
I just want to add, that's a really important tip for people that are living with early dementia or mild cognitive impairment. Go easy on yourself and just know when it's just not working. I'm just going to walk away from this, just give myself a little time out and try this again, because often just a few deep breaths or a glass of water or a little sunshine of fresh air, right? You're gonna restabilize and feel clearer and maybe be able to continue that communication.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree with that. So, you know, I mean, take a deep breath and try again later is just good general advice for all of us.
Right.
So daily, daily tasks. Maintain as much routine as you can, because routine is good for folks living with dementia. And, you know, really, if it's good for our folks with dementia, then it's good for the family as a unit, you know. So keep routine as much as possible. Focus on those activities, again, that I mentioned that give you meaning, give you joy, that allows you to use your skills and abilities in a successful manner. Don't worry so much about end products, but rather just on the engagement at the time and in the moment. Be flexible and forgiving all along and as things change for yourself, for your person living with dementia, for your care partner. Flexible and forgiving just needs to be a part of daily life when you have a diagnosis of dementia. Adapt your environment. So again, what does that mean? Everything from simplifying and removing distractions to just making it a supportive environment for you. Take your breaks when you need them, and we all need them. We all need breaks. And, again, whether dementia or, any other life situation, we do need to take breaks from one another, even from the people that we love. So we all need that. That's an important part of things. Try to keep your sense of humor. I'm just a big believer in that. And I think many, I'll say Amy and I have worked with many, many, many families over the course of our years who have had a diagnosis of dementia. And we've seen many, 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 many of these families live their lives very successfully and very joyfully. And I will say, and Amy, I hope you'll chime in, that I think many of those successful families have absolutely kept their sense of humor in their lives and their sense of just playfulness.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And take care of yourself, whether you're the person living with the diagnosis or you're the care partner. And, we know what these things are, but go back to it. Sometimes we need to go back to basics. Get your physical activity, do your best to eat, a good balanced diet, and hopefully you're having some decent sleep. And if you're not, talk to your doctor about it. Talk to us at Alzheimer's San Diego. Look at how you can maybe better manage stress. And there's lots of people and professionals that can give you good ideas as regards that. Keep your social and cognitive activities up. Stay connected to your people and, again, your activities. Do work towards injury prevention because injuries are hard to recover from. And it can be more challenging for folks living with a diagnosis of dementia. There's just additional challenges if you've got memory loss and other cognitive change going on and you're recovering from an injury. See your healthcare providers regularly and get your health, legal, and financial information up to date. Very important. So with that, I am trying to, but cannot, hand it over to Amy.
Okay. Great. Well, we have just one question that's open, but I'm actually holding off because I am going to talk about this in an upcoming segment here, but it's about safety. So please know I do see that question, but we'll hold it because we'll get to that later. But I just want to share on the topic of building the support system and sharing the diagnosis with people. There is a very helpful comment here. On a family trip last year, we had not told some of the members of our members in our group about his MCI diagnosis, mild cognitive impairment, but we should have and did after he wandered off in a shopping area. It took a while to find him, but we should have made everyone aware of his impairment before the panic. It is hard when so many other aspects of behavior seem normal and people we did not see very often just didn't realize the dementia was going on. So a really good example. We are very much in favor of sharing as much as you can because it allows you to broaden your support system for them and for you too. it's not always realistic and feasible to share every detail with everybody. But yeah, the more the neighbors know, they've got your cell phone number, they can call for help, right? If they see you out walking by yourself and you look lost, right? They've got your daughter's phone number and they can call and get some help. So we're big believers in sharing as much and as early as you feel comfortable with.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. I'll keep us going here. We're going to talk very briefly about some legal and financial planning considerations. As with most of these subjects, these are areas where we have full-length webinars just on these topics, where in particular, we have a legal and financial basics program that is taught by an attorney who can really get into the ins and who does really get into the ins and outs of much of what I'm talking about here. But they're important things to be thinking about now and planning ahead for in the future. So we just wanted to talk about them kind of broadly. The concept of advanced care planning is a very important one. We're talking about, Joanne Lynn is a geriatrician who describes advanced care planning as the type of planning that we do to plan for the what ifs in life. And I like that expression very much. Right? We all know every one of us is going to die at the end of our life, but that's all the other stuff in between here and there that advanced care planning, all of us, dementia or no dementia, need to be thinking about. Advanced care planning allows us to, it gives us an opportunity to think about our personal definitions of quality of life, what makes me feel good, what brings me emotional well-being, what stimulates me intellectually, what are my comfort needs? That's what we call a practical quality of life, right? What foods and special socks do I like to have? And then of course, our spiritual quality of life. Those aspects of you and your personality and your preferences and your values, your cultural background, all of those things are the goal of advanced care planning, that you know what they are, you've reflected on what's important to you, you got it down on paper, and you communicated what you want. If you'll recall the progression of the disease that I spoke of earlier in the program, unfortunately, we can and should be planning for a time that a person who's living with dementia, while there's much about their life they can control, there very well may come a day that they're not able to make healthcare decisions for themselves or verbally express their preferences and what they want. So advanced care planning is all about getting those wishes down on paper, documented accurately and currently, and then communicating what it is that you want. So again, just for sort of quick reference and introduction, we want you to be familiar with the key documents that we're talking about when it comes to advanced care planning. A durable power of attorney grants somebody agency to make decisions on behalf of another person. There's two types of power of attorney for asset management, sometimes referred to as general power of attorney, and then there's power of attorney for healthcare decision making. So durable just means that it lasts beyond a particular illness or incident. It stays in place when a person is unable to make decisions for themselves going forward. Every adult, everybody over age 18 should have power of attorney documents drafted in the event that there's lots of reasons any one of us may become temporarily incapacitated and unable to express our wishes and our preferences. So those documents are freely available. You don't need attorneys to do these. You can do them with attorneys as part of a comprehensive estate plan, but at the very least, these are important documents. And just having a diagnosis of dementia doesn't mean you can't sign documents and update your advance directives, right? As long as the person has decision-making capacity. And there's a lot of years in there in most cases where a person can still update all of these documents and get all this information down and communicate their wishes to their decision makers. The Advanced Healthcare Directive is a more detailed document that outlines your wishes with regard to healthcare, heroic measures, life-sustaining treatment, for example, as well as maybe end-of-life wishes. The Advanced Healthcare Directive, again, there's free versions of these that you can just download. We can connect you to resources for these. That document does typically name the durable power of attorney for healthcare within it. Wills, trusts, we just want you to be thinking about, do the estate planning documents that you currently have, if you have them, do they reflect your current wishes, right, with regard to where assets and resources will go. The POST form, the physician's order for life-sustaining treatment, this is a document that's highly recommended to be in place. Anybody that's sort of mid-stage or so in Alzheimer's disease or dementia, getting a POST completed is a really smart idea. This is a document that you complete it. It gives you a template for answering questions about how you feel about different life-sustaining measures. The use of antibiotics, for example, if you were to get pneumonia, the use of feeding tubes or ventilators, a question that's coming up for a lot of families right now. That physician's order for life-sustaining treatment, you fill out the form, you bring it to your doctor, they read it, you discuss it, and then they sign it. It's a standing physician's order, and it serves you in any type of environment, not just, for example, when you're hospitalized, right? Like a do not resuscitate order might. So this is a really important document for anybody with any type of a chronic terminal condition to get in place as soon as possible. And then HIPAA waivers. This is sort of seems like a technicality, but actually without HIPAA waivers, which waive your medical information privacy rights, a lot of family members find themselves in situations where they're trying to help somebody in the hospital or in communicating with a doctor. Maybe there's issues about driving, for example. We'll talk about that in a minute. And I don't have permission to talk to the doctor about this person. So ask doctors, banks, you know, whatever it is, what forms do they need in order for me or someone who cares for me to be able to communicate, to get information and to share information. Long-term care planning is a really big topic, and again, another one of those topics we have a whole program dedicated to, but I just think it's really important that we lay it out there now, early on. Long-term care is very expensive, right? The cost of hiring in-home care providers or arranging for an assisted living or memory care apartment for someone or for oneself. These are very expensive propositions, and Medicare and traditional forms of health insurance do not cover long-term care. They're health insurance, so they cover medical expenses, but they don't cover those services and supports that help us with those activities of daily living that I was talking about at the beginning of the program. So we want you to be aware of the range of long-term care options that are out there, and just know most people do end up paying out of pocket very heavy expenditures for the cost of long-term care if you don't have a long-term care insurance policy in place. If there is a long-term care insurance policy somewhere, dig it out now. Find it, see what it covers, get familiar with how to open a claim. It's such a shame for someone to have been paying those premiums for so many years and not be able or not take advantage of the benefit in time. The bottom line here is that long-term care is expensive. It's something to be thinking about, exploring what's out there, what options you feel comfortable with, and what you can afford now. But do be aware there are some financial planning tools. There are things like reverse mortgages or charitable gift annuities that people use to help them sort of come up with liquid assets that they can use to cover the cost of long-term care. And there are also some benefits available through the Mdicale program here in California and through the VA system for veterans and veterans who are caregivers, as well as veterans who need care. I'll leave it at that. These are very big topics, but what we just don't want is for the cost and the difficulty of identifying long-term care to come as a surprise later down the road. We really encourage you start looking into lots of great home care providers and adult day programs and residential care options here in San Diego County, or we can help you find those resources in another area if you care for somebody who doesn't live here in San Diego County. So start getting familiar with them and what they cost and how to identify them when you need them. Okay, so let's talk about safety. I know we have a question here about this. Other than bringing in 24-hour care, are there ways to ensure that someone suffering from Alzheimer's is safe and does not get hurt? Well, there's no way to ensure that, but there's no way to ensure that for any of us. Risk, unfortunately, is a part of life. But yes, there's much more risk of getting hurt for people who are living with the symptoms of dementia, right? All of those cognitive and visual spatial changes that I was talking about before. So that is what we'll be talking about here. One of the most common questions we get at Alzheimer's San Diego is, am I safe to live alone, or is the person that I care for safe to be alone, to live alone, or just to be left alone for any period of time? And as with every question we are asked, there's no standard response that's universally true for everyone. But here are the things we would ask you to think about in considering whether or not somebody is safe to be left alone. Can they recognize danger, right? If they smelled smoke, would they know what that means and know what to do? Would they be able to get help in an emergency, meaning not just making the call to 911 or the fire department, but waiting under stress for help to arrive, being able to give a report to a paramedic, for example, right? If somebody would not be able to recognize when they are not safe and or to safely wait for help to arrive, this isn't somebody that should be left alone for extended periods of time. If someone has a history of becoming disoriented and wandering, we know that increases the likelihood that it will happen again. So we'll talk a little more about wandering here in a moment, but generally, if you see that you or someone you care for becomes confused, disoriented when under stress, and has any history of wandering, then we don't want that person to be left alone. As I said before, we just have to face the hard reality about these diseases that as they progress, 24/7 supervision, if not hands-on help, but just supervision, somebody being around to help out if something is needed, is going to, in all likelihood, to be required. So some of the things to be thinking about in terms of the risks and things we can do to minimize those risks. Medications are very difficult for anyone who's got any type of a memory problem or even just some visual impairment. Medication safety is paramount. So it's one of the areas where we find that we really need to put some support and intervention in early, even before a person's really having any difficulty in any other areas. They may be struggling with keeping their medications straight or taking them correctly. So a couple of quick tips on medication safety: using one pharmacy if at all possible for all the medications. I know that isn't always feasible, but at least have a good relationship with a pharmacist somewhere at one of those pharmacies, someone you can ask about drug interactions and dosing and the timing of medications. Are there things we can do to make it easier for a person with dementia to either swallow the pill or sort of remember or manage their medications easier. Using pill organizers, developing household routine and structure. Jean talked about the importance of routine, taking medications at the same time at mealtime, or making it an event that we do together at the same time of day every day. These types of little strategies can be very helpful in reducing the risk of a medication getting skipped or doubled up if a person doesn't remember that they've already taken it, for example. And of course, as always, we just want to encourage everybody to take medications as they're prescribed, not skipping them on purpose, being mindful of food and drinks that should be avoided, for example. Driving is a hugely important topic and a very emotionally triggering one for a lot of people. The reality is that everybody with a progressive form of dementia is going to lose the ability to drive safely. Most of us will, even without a diagnosis of dementia. The vast majority of older adults, we will outlive our ability to drive safely. So planning ahead for a time that you're not driving is really an important part of living with memory loss. Cognitive impairment will affect a person's ability to drive. But does getting a diagnosis of dementia mean automatic revocation of driving privileges? No. There's a lot of confusion around this in California. We have a law, a doctor does need to report that to the DMV, but then the DMV makes a decision about what they're going to do in terms of retesting the person, calling them in for a hearing, for example, or they may choose to just revoke the driving privileges. So it's a person's ability to drive safely that determines whether or not they can continue to drive, not whether or not they have a diagnosis. It's a minor difference, but it's an important one. So we can connect you to resources for getting an objective driver safety evaluation. We can work with you on requesting that somebody be reevaluated by the DMV. This is a simple report that request that anybody can make. We can support you in helping you find those forms and walk through that. We really encourage you to talk with the doctor about driving. I know those conversations about driving and driving privileges are a huge obstacle to getting diagnosed for a lot of people. There's a lot of fear around not driving. And it's again, just one of those sort of unpleasant and unavoidable hornet's nests that we sometimes just have to kick when it comes to living with memory loss. But as in all things, very important to know what the transportation alternatives are. Right? The fear of not driving is all about the fear of being dependent on others, the fear of not having one's own autonomy anymore. So if we can put a plan in place so that this individual can still go everywhere they want to go, they still have those freedoms and access, that takes away a lot of the emotion and the fear and the anger that might come up around those hard conversations around driving. So wandering, a critically important safety risk to be aware of in people that are living with dementia. Everybody with a progressive form of dementia is at risk of wandering. And what we mean by wandering is just getting lost in a moment of confusion, disorientation, going in search of someone or something, and not being able to get back to where you started from. Wandering occurs, we know that it happens to about 60% or so of people with dementia, but we suspect it actually happens to a lot more. 60% is what gets reported, right? It's very, very common. It can happen on foot. It can happen in cars, public transportation. The incident that one of our attendees today shared about that family trip and somebody wandering, getting lost in a shopping center is a really good example of why it can be so helpful to set up that kind of local network of support. So people recognize, boy, if you see my dad out there by himself, here's what's going on, here's how you can reach me, please let me know. We're very lucky here in San Diego County. We have a nationally recognized program called Take Me Home. It's a program that is operated through the San Diego Sheriff's Department, so it works countywide. A free wandering response program wherein a person's good close-up photograph of their face and some information about them is put into a secured, safe database. And that way, if they get lost, you just call up 911. My person is not where I expected them to be. They're in the Take Me Home program. Their information gets sent out immediately to local law enforcement, wherever that jurisdiction is, and they can then start that search right away with complete information. So Take Me Home, a resource we highly recommend. There's information about it on our website, as well as Medical Alert, which are the little pendants that can be on a bracelet or a necklace or a wallet card or clothing tags that identify a person as having a medical condition. And Alzheimer's and other types of dementia are medical conditions. And you can have it read that I'm living with memory loss, and it's got a phone number that a Good Samaritan or a first responder can call to connect you to your primary contact and get you back home as quickly as possible. That's what it's all about in wandering, is just getting back home as quickly and as safely as possible. There are also some pretty nifty GPS and other technology devices that they're pretty widely available now. They're still pretty expensive, unfortunately. But if you're interested in learning about some of those, just contact our office and our social workers can talk you through. There's GPS, of course, there's smartphones GPS can be turned on, but there's also little devices that go right in the sole of your shoe or in your bag or attached to your keys that can be used for tracking somebody's whereabouts to prevent wandering, but also just to get the person to find them and get them back home as quickly as possible. Finally, a very tricky topic, similarly to driving. The use of firearms is an issue that a lot of families are going to have to confront when it comes to living with memory loss. As with driving, cognitive impairment will affect a person's ability to safely handle firearms, regardless of how long they've used them, how experienced, how skilled they have been throughout their life, no matter how safe they have always been in managing firearms. So we really recommend that people consider removing weapons from the home, transferring ownership of firearms if that's feasible, if that's possible. It is not always feasible. Gun transfer and ownership laws are exceptionally complicated, and these are people's property. You can't just go in and take them. So when that's not possible, we recommend, the use of gun safes, keeping ammunition separately from the firearm, or installing a very simple cable gun lock so that the firearms don't need to be removed. They're just disabled. We actually have a partnership with a local gun range here in San Diego that has provided us, the Poway Weapons and Gear has provided us with a huge supply of cable gun locks that we can give out as many as you need. Just let us know. We'll get them to you however we can, since our offices aren't open. We'll mail them out or figure it out somehow. But this is a really nice and totally free solution to securing firearms when it's not possible to remove them. So let us know, or of course, contact local law enforcement if you've got questions about firearm safety. I think in the interest of time, I'm gonna skip questions. I don't see any that are open, Jean, so if that sounds okay, I will just pass it on to you. We'll wrap up here.
Yes, and so I am going to Zoom through the rest of our Zoom.
Hey.
Ask for help when you need it, folks, and accept it when it's offered, please. We do all sorts of really wonderful things at Alzheimer's San Diego, and so give us a call or have a look at our website, see all the different things that we're up to. And if you don't have a clear idea of really what it is you think you need or you think you want, just call us and we'll help dial it down for you. We can tell you all about the different programs and services that we offer to families and help figure out which ones might make the most sense for you right now. What I will say is that all of the programs and services that we offer to the community of San Diego are at no charge. And we are a local nonprofit, so all the fundraising that we do goes to support these programs and services. The money all stays here in San Diego. So we've got a great program coming up that's called Take Charge. It's a 5-week education and support series. It is for people, for families who have received a new diagnosis of some type of dementia. And it is for the care partners and the people living with dementia. And if you think that that might be something you're interested in, or it might have some positive impact for you, what I would ask you to do is call this general number of 858-492-4400, and you can just ask to speak to me, Jean, and I'll tell you more about that program. And it's really terrific. It's kind of like today's class, but in depth. So we do lots of good things, as I said. So there's our website and our phone number. And Amy's going to send out a link in chat.
It's in there. Yep.
Oh, it is. There it is. Look at that. So that if you do want to speak, one-on-one with a social worker, either by email or by phone, fill out that form and you'll hear back from one of our team. We are sending out another link here because we would like to get your feedback.
They'll get this one when the webinar ends.
Okay. And so you'll get an online survey that we ask you please to complete, and that tells us, what you're thinking about our program and how we can make it better and continue to improve things. And that link will go out together with a copy of today's link to today's recorded program. Everybody will get that. We've got ongoing webinars coming up. This 2 that you see listed are for care partners, and that's next week and the week after. And you can go again on our website and you can see kind of the lineup for classes, webinars that are occurring over the summer. So feel free to do that.
Okay.
Oh, look at that. I'll just stop right here then. So thank you, everybody. We did go a little bit over. Thank you for being here with us today. And any questions that come up, please reach out to us. We are here, and that's what we're here for, is to support you.
Thank you very much. We look forward to hearing your feedback. And again, if you've got more questions about your individual situation or want to connect to any of these resources we've talked about, just fill that little form out that we sent out in the chat, and a social worker will reach out to you in the next day or 2. Or you can just call us anytime. We're here. Thank you. Well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar, and we hope to see you at another program soon. Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Happy 4th of July.
Yes, have a wonderful holiday. Stay safe.